Imagine walking into a bathroom inside one of England's most historic palaces. Marble floors, towering ceilings, chandeliers that could buy a house on their own. But there, in the middle of this polished, aristocratic setting, sits something so out of place, so bizarre that it almost feels like a prank. Not porcelain, not polished brass, but a toilet made of solid gold. 18 carats of glittering heavy metal. A fully functioning plumbed-in toilet, real pipes, real water, real use, and it isn't just some ornamental trophy. No, this is art. A work with a name, a reputation, and a jaw-dropping price tag. Its title? America. Its estimated value? Over $6 million. That's right, a golden toilet worth more than a mansion. Now, art heists are nothing new. The world has seen priceless Rembrandts vanish, Caravaggios slip into the underworld, and diamonds disappear in the dead of night. But this? A toilet ripped straight out of a palace bathroom. This isn't just a crime. It's an act so audacious, so ridiculous, that it reads like satire. But make no mistake, this wasn't a harmless prank. It was a serious theft, a destructive, deliberate act, and the toilet has never been seen since. To understand the madness of this crime, you have to know where it happened. Blenheim Palace, Oxfordshire, England, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. A sprawling Baroque masterpiece with grand courtyards, sweeping gardens, and 300 years of aristocratic history. It was built for the Duke of Marlborough in the early 1700s, and it's forever tied to the memory of its most famous resident, Winston Churchill, who was born there in 1874. Inside, it feels less like a home and more like a monument. Endless halls, priceless antiques, military trophies, portraits staring down from gilded frames. Blenheim is not a place where you'd expect to find satire. It's a shrine to tradition, nobility, and grandeur. And yet, tucked away in one of its stately bathrooms was this golden, glimmering throne. Installed in 2019 as part of a contemporary art exhibition, it was a deliberate clash, the absurdity of modern commentary inside the walls of ancient wealth. Visitors could line up to actually use it. Yes, you could sit on millions of dollars, lock the door behind you, and contemplate the absurdity of flushing gold. The toilet wasn't meant to blend in. It was meant to provoke, to mock excess, to make you laugh, to make you think. But here's the thing. Provocation doesn't just attract museum goers. It attracts thieves. So let's go back to that night. September 14th, 2019. Sometime before dawn, a group of burglars broke in. They knew exactly what they wanted, and they knew exactly where to find it. By 4:57 in the morning, they were gone, vanished into the English countryside with a toilet worth millions. When staff discovered the scene, disbelief quickly gave way to chaos. At first, some thought it must be a joke. Surely no one would or could steal a $6 million toilet. But reality sank in fast. The piece was gone. And when the news hit the headlines, it spread like wildfire. This wasn't just another burglary. It was the golden toilet heist. The media pounced. Late-night comedians had a field day. Tabloids ran headlines mixing crime with bathroom humor. And yet, beneath the laughter, law enforcement treated it as deadly serious, a high-value theft of international significance. But the questions loomed. Who stole it? Why risk everything for a toilet? And most puzzling of all, how do you even get rid of a $6 million golden toilet? Was it melted down, hidden in some eccentric collector's vault? Or was it simply destroyed in the process? Years later, those questions still have no clear answers. The golden toilet has never resurfaced. No buyer has ever emerged. A priceless Rembrandt stolen? We've seen it before. A diamond vanishing in Antwerp? That's part of the lore of art crime. But this? A golden toilet stolen in the dead of night, ripped from the heart of Winston Churchill's birthplace? That's something else entirely. A crime so absurd, so outrageous, that it feels almost like performance art in itself. And yet somewhere beneath the humor lies a darker truth. A piece of history was damaged, a piece of art was lost, and a palace was left flooded. So, who stole it? Why did they take it? And perhaps the most pressing question of all, What on earth do you even do with a golden toilet? This is the story of the golden toilet heist. To understand how a golden toilet ends up in a palace, and why anyone would want to steal it, we need to meet the man behind the madness. Maurizio Cattelan is an Italian conceptual artist with a reputation for mischief, provocation, and a flair for the absurd. Born in Padua in 1960, Cattelan grew up outside the art world, working odd jobs, dabbling in furniture design, and always leaning toward the unconventional. He never trained formally at an art academy, and maybe that's exactly what gave him his edge. He was an outsider, someone who looked at art not as a tradition to respect, but as a system to poke fun at, to toy with, to dismantle. And poke fun he did. Cattelan is the kind of artist who once duct-taped his own gallerist to a wall during an exhibition. The kind of artist who created a sculpture of Pope John Paul II struck down by a meteorite. The kind of artist who sold a taxidermied horse head first into a wall. His work often hovers between comedy and outrage, a balancing act where you're never sure whether to laugh, gasp, or both. So, in 2016, when he unveiled his latest creation, a solid gold toilet titled America, the art world wasn't exactly surprised, but it was definitely talking. At first glance, it's, well, a toilet. Same shape, same size, same design as the one in your bathroom right now, but forged entirely in 18-karat gold, heavy, gleaming, decadent. And yet, this wasn't just meant to be ogled. Cattelan insisted it was fully functional, and when the piece debuted at the Guggenheim Museum in New York, it was installed in an actual restroom stall. Visitors could book time slots, yes, actual reservations, to use it. Up to 5 minutes at a time. Imagine that for a moment. Walking into one of the world's most prestigious museums, flashing your time ticket, and then locking the door behind you to do your business on art worth millions. It wasn't just spectacle. It was satire. Cattelan titled the piece America Deliberately, as a not-so-subtle jab at wealth, greed, consumerism, and the mythology of the American dream. What better symbol than a golden toilet, an object of necessity, turned into an icon of ridiculous excess? Whatever you eat, the artist quipped, a $200 lunch or a $2 hot dog, the results are the same. The point was sharp. The rich and powerful may live lives of glitter and gold, but in the bathroom, everyone is equal. Of course, not everyone agreed. Some critics hailed it as brilliant, a Duchamp-style gesture for the 21st century, perfectly timed in an era of widening inequality. Others rolled their eyes. Was this really art? Or just a stunt designed to get headlines? The public didn't care. The lines at the Guggenheim told the real story. People were fascinated. The chance to sit on gold, to flush satire down the pipes, it was irresistible. And the toilet became infamous beyond the art world. When the White House once requested a Van Gogh loan from the Guggenheim, the museum cheekily offered America instead. That single gesture turned the golden toilet into an international news story, a shimmering, plumbed-in middle finger to power and politics. Now fast forward 3 years, the toilet leaves New York and makes its way across the Atlantic to England, to the hallowed halls of Blenheim Palace. Suddenly, this icon of satire isn't just a museum attraction anymore. It's installed in a bathroom inside the birthplace of Winston Churchill. A gleaming, golden critique of capitalism sitting inside a shrine of aristocracy. And that's where the lines blur. Because for all its biting commentary, America wasn't just a symbol. It was an object made of solid gold, heavy, valuable, and vulnerable, which made it not only irresistible as art, but irresistible as a target. For thieves looking to make headlines, this was the perfect prize. Part treasure, part joke, part statement. A theft so absurd, so outlandish, that the act itself would become inseparable from the artwork's meaning. And so it was. But first, let's rewind. Before the heist, before the chaos, we need to understand how America arrived at Blenheim, and why its short stay there would end in one of the most bizarre art crimes of the century. It happened in the small hours of September 14th, 2019. At precisely 4:57 a.m., burglars forced their way into the palace. The details are still hazy. Investigators believe they used at least 2 vehicles and had multiple accomplices. But what is certain is that this wasn't a simple grab-it-and-run job. The golden toilet wasn't just sitting on display, it was installed, bolted into the palace's plumbing system. To steal it meant ripping apart pipes, tearing through fittings, and flooding the very foundations of Blenheim. But that's exactly what they did. The thieves wrenched the toilet from its moorings, leaving behind a wreck of broken connections. Water began to gush out, flooding the bathroom and seeping into the palace floors. What had been a piece of satirical art instantly turned into a very real act of vandalism, with water damage threatening priceless rooms nearby. The irony? The toilet that mocked wealth had now, in its absence, caused very literal destruction to one of England's great homes of wealth. What happened next has all the markings of a well-practiced crew. The toilet itself weighed over 200 pounds, far too heavy for 1 or 2 people to carry casually. Police believe several individuals worked together, lifting it into a waiting getaway vehicle. Some reports even suggest a convoy, 1 car to break in, another to transport the stolen gold, and perhaps a third to act as a lookout. And then, just like that, they were gone. The entire job took minutes. By the time alarms sounded and staff responded, the thieves had vanished into the night with their glittering prize. It didn't take long for the palace staff to realize what had happened. Guards rushed to the scene, first confronted by the mess. Water pouring across the floor, pipes torn apart, the faint metallic tang of destruction in the air. And then the realization hit. The toilet, the golden toilet, was gone. It sounds like the punchline of a bad joke. Even the guards, in later interviews, admitted to a sense of disbelief. Art thefts usually involve paintings cut from frames or sculptures spirited away in crates. But this? They stole? The toilet? The news spread quickly through the palace corridors and then out into the world. By dawn, word was already trickling into the press. By mid-morning, it had exploded. Headlines wrote themselves. Toilet heist at Blenheim Palace. Thieves flush security at historic home. Art crime goes down the drain. Journalists pounced on the absurdity. Here was a crime that sounded like satire itself, and yet it was real, and the damage was serious. A toilet worth millions, ripped from a palace bathroom in the dead of night. The juxtaposition was irresistible. For Blenheim Palace, the theft was a disaster, not just a priceless artwork gone, but also tens of thousands of gallons of water threatening its historic floors. For law enforcement, it was an immediate priority. And for the world's media, it was comedy gold. Within hours, the golden toilet heist wasn't just a British news item, it was global. From the New York Times to late-night comedy shows, everyone had something to say about the crime that was equal parts outrageous, ridiculous, and strangely poetic. But behind the laughter, serious questions remained. Who had done it? How had they pulled it off so cleanly? And most importantly, where could a 200-pound solid gold toilet possibly disappear to? The investigation was just beginning. When word first broke, many people assumed the story was a prank. A golden toilet had been stolen? From Blenheim Palace? It sounded like something lifted straight from a Monty Python sketch. But for the Thames Valley Police, the matter was deadly serious. A high-value burglary, committed inside one of the United Kingdom's most treasured heritage sites, wasn't a laughing matter. Beyond the absurd headlines, there was the cold reality. A $6 million artwork had disappeared, and in its absence, the damage to the palace was extensive. This wasn't just a quirky news item. It was a crime scene. Within hours, detectives cordoned off the palace and launched a major investigation. Extra officers were pulled in, and teams combed through the bathroom, hallways, and grounds for clues. Soon, the first arrests followed. Police detained several men, ranging in age from their 30s to their 60s. The raids took place across Oxfordshire and London, and headlines quickly announced, "Toilet thieves caught." Except, they weren't. Despite the early optimism, none of the arrests led to charges that stuck. One man was released on bail, others were let go without sufficient evidence. And crucially, the golden toilet itself remained missing. It was as if it had been flushed away from existence. Cameras at Blenheim and nearby roads gave detectives a few leads. They identified vehicles believed to be linked to the theft. At least two, possibly more. Police suspected a carefully planned operation. One vehicle to break into the palace grounds, another to transport the toilet itself, and perhaps a third to scout or distract. But while the footage confirmed movement, it didn't provide the smoking gun. The toilet was never caught on camera being carried or loaded, and without the golden centerpiece, the case was frustratingly incomplete. The palace bathroom was a mess, not just because of the theft, but because of the severe flooding it caused. Water had gushed from broken pipes, spreading across the floors and washing away potential evidence. Forensic investigators struggled. Fingerprints, smudged, partial, or useless. Footprints, distorted by water. DNA, possible traces were found, but the results were inconclusive. And without a body, or in this case, a toilet, to tie them to, the evidence wasn't enough. One investigator described it later as a near-professional operation. Whoever had taken the golden toilet knew what they were doing, and had managed to leave remarkably little behind. With the investigation stalling, speculation filled the vacuum. What had become of Maurizio Cattelan's 18-carat satire? Some suggested the obvious, that it had been melted down for its raw value. Gold is fungible. Once melted into bars or ingots, it would be impossible to trace. The toilet's artistic value would vanish, but the thieves could walk away with millions. Others thought differently. Perhaps the toilet was being kept intact, hidden in some private collection. A strange, ostentatious trophy, the kind of object whispered about in criminal circles, passed from one shadowy figure to another, always unseen. Museum staff, meanwhile, struggled with the absurdity of the situation. One remarked, "You don't just steal a toilet and hide it under the bed, but you also don't exactly put it on display. Where do you even keep something like this?" The bafflement was real. And then there was the artist himself. When news reached Maurizio Cattelan, he initially thought it was a joke. "Who's so stupid to steal a toilet?" he quipped. For an artist who made his name with satire, the absurdity seemed almost too perfect. But as reality sank in, his tone shifted. The theft had transformed America into something else entirely. The toilet had begun as a commentary on wealth and greed. Now, in disappearing, it became an even sharper symbol, a critique that had written its own next chapter. Some commentators even argued the theft had made America Cattelan's most successful work. After all, what better critique of greed and absurdity than a missing golden toilet, stolen in the night, leaving only destruction behind? But for Blenheim Palace, and for police investigators, there was nothing clever or satirical about it. A heritage site had been damaged, an international artwork had vanished, and the culprits were still at large. By the end of 2019, the investigation was ongoing but frustratingly inconclusive. Police continued to question suspects, analyze footage, and chase leads, but without the toilet itself, every arrest felt like a false dawn. The crime sat in a strange balance, half comedy, half tragedy. The world chuckled at the idea of a missing golden toilet. Meanwhile, officers and curators stared at a ruined bathroom, an irreplaceable palace scarred by water damage, and a glaring gap in the world of contemporary art. The golden toilet had once been a satire. Now, it was a ghost, and the mystery was only deepening. For years, the theft of the golden toilet hovered in that strange space between comedy and tragedy. It became a running gag in late-night monologues, a favorite curiosity in weird crime news roundups, a story people remembered with a chuckle. "Hey, do you remember when someone stole a golden toilet from a palace?" But for the Thames Valley Police, the laughter masked an unfinished case. Detectives refused to let the matter drop. Slowly, painstakingly, over the course of years, their work began to bear fruit. The real turning point came through forensic science. Among the smeared prints and water-damaged debris inside Blenheim Palace, investigators had found a fragment of DNA. For months it sat in evidence, too partial to identify. But advances in testing and comparisons with known offenders eventually produced a match. The DNA pointed to James Sheen, a career criminal with a long record of high-value burglaries. Police began digging into his background, monitoring his activities. In the process, they discovered something startling. When officers raided Sheen's property, they found gold fragments, small, irregular pieces, too small to reassemble into anything meaningful. But chemically analyzed, they were confirmed to be 18-karat gold, precisely the material from which Maurizio Cattelan's America had been crafted. It was the first physical proof investigators had that connected a suspect directly to the vanished toilet. Sheen was arrested. From there, detectives unraveled a network. Surveillance footage and phone records tied Sheen to two other men, Michael Jones and Frederick Doe. Jones, it turned out, had been spotted on cameras visiting Blenheim Palace the day before the heist. Not only that, but records showed he had purchased a ticket, entered the palace as a tourist, and, in a detail that would later become infamous, actually used the golden toilet during his reconnaissance, the very object he would help to steal the following night. Doe's role was less direct but still critical. Investigators alleged that he had helped arrange the transfer of the gold once the toilet had been dismantled, connecting Sheen's crew with potential buyers. In late 2023, after years of quiet detective work, police were finally confident enough to bring the men to trial. The case reached the courts in 2025, and by then the world was ready to tune back in. Reporters flocked to the hearings, eager to revive the story of the missing toilet. Inside the courtroom, however, the mood was less comic. Prosecutors laid out the case methodically, presenting DNA analysis, fragments of gold, and phone records. They described the planning, reconnaissance, vehicles, and coordinated timing. They painted a picture of a professional burglary, one that left not only financial loss but also irreparable cultural damage. For the defendants, the trial played out in different ways. James Sheen, faced with overwhelming forensic evidence, including his DNA at the crime scene and gold fragments in his home, pleaded guilty to burglary, conspiracy to transfer criminal property, and related charges. The judge described him as the ringleader of the operation. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison. Michael Jones fought the charges, forcing the prosecution to prove its case in full. Ultimately, jurors were swayed by the evidence, the camera footage of his reconnaissance, his connection to Sheen, and his movements around the palace. He was convicted of burglary and sentenced to 2 years and 3 months. Frederick Doe, meanwhile, faced charges not for the burglary itself, but for conspiracy to transfer criminal property. Prosecutors argued he had helped move the gold fragments into criminal markets. But with fewer direct links, and a history less hardened than Sheen's, he received a suspended sentence. A fourth man, London jeweler Bora Gukuk, was also brought to trial, accused of involvement in laundering the stolen gold. But in his case, the jury wasn't convinced. He was acquitted, found not guilty of conspiracy to transfer criminal property. The verdicts reflected the complex nature of the crime, some clear evidence, some circumstantial, and plenty of shadows that the prosecution simply couldn't illuminate. Through it all, one glaring fact remained: the golden toilet itself. Maurizio Cattelan's America, valued at over $6 million, was gone. Prosecutors told the court that investigators believed it had been dismantled within days of the theft, sawed apart, melted down, reduced to raw gold, sold off in fragments, scattered into countless anonymous transactions. If true, it meant the toilet was not simply stolen but destroyed. Cattelan's biting satire on wealth and absurdity had been swallowed up by the very greed it critiqued. For art lovers, curators, and critics, it was devastating. The piece was irreplaceable, and yet paradoxically, its disappearance may have cemented its legend forever. Even with convictions secured, Thames Valley Police were clear: the case was not over. In June 2025, they released a statement. Investigators said they believed they knew the identities of at least 2 other individuals involved in the heist, men who had helped carry out the burglary or move the stolen gold. But the evidence was not yet strong enough to bring charges. The investigation, they stressed, remained active. For the public, the story ended with mixed emotions. On one hand, there was relief. At last, some accountability, some measure of justice. On the other hand, there was frustration, because the golden toilet itself remained lost, likely gone forever. In the end, the trial did little to erase the absurdity of the crime. Even the judge, stern as he was, acknowledged the bizarre nature of the case. A priceless artwork, a functioning toilet, stolen from a palace in the dead of night. It had all the elements of farce, yet the consequences were painfully real. As reporters filed their stories, one headline summed it up perfectly. Jail for toilet thieves, but the loo is lost forever. And with that, the world turned the page, or tried to. Because the golden toilet wasn't just missing. It had become something bigger, a mystery, a legend, a symbol, and even with convictions secured, it left one lingering question hanging in the air. Who still knows the truth about what happened to Maurizio Cattelan's golden toilet? The trial may have delivered convictions, but in the end, one glaring truth remained. The golden toilet itself was gone. A $6 million artwork, once plumbed into the stately pipes of Blenheim Palace, had simply vanished from the face of the earth. Unlike stolen paintings that resurface decades later in private collections or obscure storage units, the fate of America seemed bleakly final. Investigators, art experts, and even the artist himself all reached the same conclusion. The thieves had likely destroyed it. The toilet had been cut apart, melted down, and sold as raw gold. If true, it meant one of the most infamous pieces of conceptual art of the 21st century existed only as scattered fragments. Jewelry, coins, or perhaps anonymous bars stored in a vault. And that, in a way, was the bitter punchline of Maurizio Cattelan's satire. His toilet, meant to reflect on the absurdities of wealth and greed, had become a victim of greed itself. He later mused, almost grimly, that perhaps this was the perfect ending for the piece. What better commentary on capitalism than a work of art, intended as critique, being literally cashed in for its base value? A sculpture designed to challenge the system had been consumed by it. For Blenheim Palace, however, the consequences were not philosophical but material. The theft had caused flooding and significant damage to historic sections of the estate. The Duke of Marlborough's family had to reckon with repairs, heightened security, and an unwanted legacy. Their ancestral home was now tied forever to one of the strangest art crimes in history. Tourists still arrive, eager to stand in the spot where the golden throne once gleamed. They ask about the burglary almost as often as about Winston Churchill's birthplace. The palace, in turn, leaned into the notoriety, proof that even the most embarrassing chapter can become a curious draw. For law enforcement, the case remains a nagging frustration. Yes, ringleaders were punished. Yes, they proved their professionalism in tracking down key suspects across years of painstaking work. But the centerpiece, the golden toilet itself, slipped through their fingers. Even in 2025, police maintain that at least 2 more conspirators remain at large. The full story of who dismantled, transported, and profited from the stolen art is still incomplete. The case remains open. In the broader world of art and crime, the heist stands apart. This wasn't the theft of a Rembrandt, a Monet, or a Van Gogh, cultural treasures universally revered. It wasn't the kind of masterpiece that black market collectors might covet in secret. Instead, it was a provocation, a satire, a toilet. And yet its loss hit headlines worldwide, perhaps louder than any stolen painting in recent years. Why? Because of the sheer absurdity. Because of the way it straddled the line between comedy and tragedy. And because, deep down, everyone could imagine the story. Masked burglars fleeing into the night with a gleaming $5 million toilet in tow. That image became legend, and legends linger long after evidence disappears. So what is the legacy of the golden toilet heist? For some, it's a cautionary tale about museum security, a reminder that even the most outlandish crimes can succeed. For others, it's proof of the enduring power of satire, that a toilet could spark debates about art, wealth, politics, and human folly for years after its disappearance. And for Maurizio Cattelan, perhaps it's confirmation that his work did exactly what it was meant to do, to make people think, to laugh, and above all, to never forget. In the end, the golden toilet may be gone, but the story it left behind is priceless. And that, my friends, is the curious tale of the golden toilet heist, a crime as absurd as it was brilliant, and still unsolved in many ways. If you enjoyed this story and want to dive into more bizarre art thefts, unsolved mysteries, or strange true crimes, I'd love to hear from you. Drop your ideas in the comments. Which disappearance, heist, or curious crime should we explore next? I'll do my best to bring your suggestions to life in my future episodes. And of course, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next story of intrigue, art, and mystery.